Fire Radio.
Hey everybody, it's Rob from National Fire Radio, Revolutionary Fire Texas at the Lake. Very honored to be sitting here with the other Rob, who's much more handsome and much more accomplished than I have, Rob Fisher.
It's good to meet you, Rob. I like your name.
Yeah, this one's a very few times where I get to meet cool people named Rob. So usually I'm like, oh, hey, you're a loser like me. But
do you always get called Bob?
Yeah.
Pretty easy.
And then old ladies, they pinch my cheek and they say Bob or Bobby. I'm like, I'm not a Bobby, it's Rob. Like I get very upset.
I do get called Robbie. It just all depends on what part of the country you're in. You know, like I was a Robbie when I was named after my dad's friend from Vietnam. His name was Robbie, but they called me Robert, of course, the official name, and I've always been Rob. But when you go back east, everything's it's got a B on it, so it's always Robbie. So depends on where I'm at. It's either Rob or Robbie.
Right, yeah. I run into the same issues, and then like when I go down south, my brother-in-law is married to my sister's. He's a Robbie as well. So when we're both in trouble, we just get the two Robbies.
The two Robbies.
And that's not, it's really.
Just don't call me Bobby. That's like a Bobby Brady thing.
So an accomplished career. You got here to the Revolution. The keynote was amazing.
Thanks.
Really loved it. Like just so like kind of for those who don't know you. Kind of just like what's the synopsis of who you are, where you work, and whatnot. Just like a real brief.
Yeah, this is my 36th year in the American Fire Service. I spent a few years prior to that as a cadet, when I was 15 years old. But this is all I've done in my lifetime. I'm from the Pacific Northwest area, so I've worked on the other side of the country. Things are a little bit different. I spent a short period of time as a firefighter. I mean, if I were to use my cadet years and everything, you could say I was a firefighter for about 10 years. I was a company officer for 20 years. And in that 20-year period of time, I went in the training division multiple times. And then I've been a battalion chief now for just over 6 years. And so a good portion of my career has been as a company officer. And the greater portion of that, as I spent 17 years on the ladder truck in a smaller department. We're a suburban department. The department's grown over my career because we've had mergers over the years, but right now our department is 10 stations, does about 17,000 calls a year, 9 engines and 1 ladder truck. And so I've always worked on a quint, and that's why one of my classes was quintessentials and the unconventional truck and other classes surrounding quints. But I spent my entire career working on a quint. And then I promoted up to battalion chief, and so here I am today. And now my focus is, because I don't work on the ladder truck, my focus is more along the lines of tactics and leadership and mentorship.
Yeah, and which is a huge thing that's kind of lacking. Watch the fire service, and there's some organizations that are really nailing it out of the park, and then there's others that are really. It's sad in a way that they're kind of setting people up for failure and leaving them out to dry because there is no mentor. To kind of guide them along, so that's a very needed aspect of this for the fire service.
Yeah, one of the things that I've done with my co-founder Ryan Selleck is we've started an online mentor group we call Young Officers on Fire. And earlier in my career, I had done some type of trying to piece together mentoring and trying to figure the whole thing out, and through leadership and other classes that I've been in, really trying to get the grasp on mentorship. I've got a really close friend that is high up. He's a vice president with the Marriott International Hotels and used to work for Starbucks and used to work for Amazon. My wife used to work for Philips, and so I've kind of looked at like the corporate world of how they handle things. And so since then, we've created this online mentor group. And what we try to do is just connect people together, or connect firefighters together with other firefighters, so that they can share experiences, they can make a connection with somebody else. Because it is, I think that if you were to go back in the fire service 40, 50 years ago, mentorship was just part of it. Right. But we were a different organization. We were all white men typically, and everybody was very similar in their beliefs.
Right.
Well, the world's different today. We don't all have the same beliefs. From even in the fire station, it's a more diverse group, and so we have devices now that make us individuals, right? And we don't have this type of conversation anymore. We text everything. So trying to create some type of mentorship to realign us back in the fire service to going back to the old ways of doing things is kind of what our group's doing now.
Who was, like, looking back, you know, from the start of your career, who were some of the mentors that like took you under the wing to make you into who you've become today?
Yeah, the first one would be my operations chief, and I think that for most firefighters coming in, their initial mentor, if they grew up in the family, and I'm a first generation firefighter, so I had no, my dad wasn't in it, my uncles weren't in it, but if I were to look at it, if you were in the family, probably your first mentor is going to be your dad or your uncle or whatever it be, and then once you get in, you're probably going to have that first captain that's going to have that impact. That's just going to give you some lasting impression. For me, it was our operations chief. Again, when I started, it was a smaller department, but Eric Andrews, he's now retired, and he's the chief up the valley for a volunteer fire department. But he's brilliant. I mean, he was just a really smart guy. He was really into the fire service. And the thing that was really cool about him is our organization was small. We didn't have much money. But he went out of his way to help me go to training because he saw that I had a desire to be better than myself. He saw that I loved training. He saw that, I wanted to be the best that I can be. And through his volunteer organization, he would like, hey, we're going to this conference. You're welcome to stay at the hotel. I'll just hook you up with one of my volunteers. So I'd get hotel rooms to stay for free. And then he would finagle ways that he would pay for my conference. And so all I had to do was get there.
Right.
And early on in a career, when somebody gives you, you can see that they're giving you that much commitment, and they entrust you and empower you to do things. So he probably would have been the very first that, like, if I could emulate my career, it would be to be a lot like Eric Andrews.
And now, 10 years in, you become a company officer. Like, I mean, I would just imagine, was he still working on
Yep.
on the mentoring aspect for that for
Yep.
you as well?
Yeah, he was the chief of the training division at the time, and then it was in 2000 basically, the department was doing this big plan with the entire county, and so he had to leave the department to go and work on this county plan. We were getting 800 megahertz radios, so he was part of the county division. Well, I had the opportunity. He said, "Do you want to be the captain of training? We haven't had a captain of training," and so he entrusted all training in the organization to me. And the reason is because he saw my commitment, he saw my dedication, and at that time we didn't have to test. There was no big thing. It's like, I want you to do it. And there again, another mentoring thing is that he expressed that I trust you to do this, and that was incredible. So I got the opportunity to run the training division as a captain, and I was only a company officer at that time for about 4 years. And so very, very, very fortunate. And then, going into that, I'm getting outside. There was a number of people in our organization back that I could say that were mentors. Chief Janet Jager, one of the first female firefighters in our area, phenomenal firefighter, great. She was my company officer. I drove her for a few years before I got promoted, and then she finally became my battalion chief. And her caring aspect, and she was the one that, because I wanted to go to medic school, she was the one that said, you're a teacher. You're somebody that likes to. You need to become a company officer. And paramedic thing didn't work out for me, and so she kind of inspired me to become a company officer and go that route, and battalion chief and college and all that kind of stuff. But guys like Mike Galliano, being in the Puget Sound area, I had the opportunity to meet up with Mike early on, and Mike's a great guy. Now you look at it as you progress up in your career, I've got Scott Thompson, Kurt Isaacson, all these other guys that I'm now networked with that really bring a lot. Todd Edwards, they brought a lot to the table for me, and it has been great.
When you bring up something that I think is commonplace in a lot of departments, is that as you're promoting, I don't want to say you have to, but there's a lot of places where that you have that stop at the MTO position where you're going to be in charge of training. I know, I'm going through it right now. Got promoted back in April, so I'm in charge of training. It's such a huge responsibility. And I know sometimes, I'm very excited to be there because, now I think things from the organization that I want to see get better, improved. We can start focusing on that. And, just really quickly, this past group of probies that we had, we actually loaded the first 3 weeks of training with firefighter training, because it used to be reversed. We used to do all this EMS stuff, and then now we focus on firefighting, and it's really changed the attitude of the department around it, being no. We are a fire department that also does EMS instead of an EMS department that sometimes does fires. But how important is it for the people who are getting promoted and going through there to really embrace that position, because I feel like sometimes people don't, and it's more of a burden. They want to get back on the line, which I completely get, but do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things is that the best way to growth is getting out of your comfort zone. So it doesn't matter if it's going in the training division, if it's going in and working special projects in EMS or in tech rescue. But majority of the firefighters, at least in my part of the neck of the woods, we work 24-hour shifts or 48-hour shifts, and nobody wants to leave the line. And it's not just because they want to work shifts; they also like to work, right? I like going to the fires and I like going to emergencies. But I think that when you're looking at promoting up and you're looking at taking on responsibilities, you kind of got to get a more global picture, right? You can't just like stay within. You got to kind of get outside your lane. You got to get uncomfortable, and I think that that's where you start getting a lot of growth. And the training division is a great example of where you can get some growth, because when I went in, I was thinking, man, all I'm going to be doing is just training all day long. When I first went in the training division the first time, that wasn't the case. I mean, it's like I had a lot of paperwork I had to process. I had individuals that had to sign up for classes, and that just gave you another appreciation for the full, what's the purpose of the organization, and what are we trying to get at. And when you go outside of your normal areas, you kind of get an appreciation of truly what we are doing, and what service are we providing to the people that we protect.
Yeah, I asked Todd Edwards about it, and he said that, like, he's like, it may take you a year to figure out where you're going. You'll get that drowning feeling, but you're making progress as long as you're kind of starting off every day with the right foot forward kind of thing. And I was like, all right. And yeah, it's I like the idea of personal growth through being uncomfortable. You have to have that experience.
Yeah.
It's not sometimes easy for us to do, because you might have to admit that you don't know something, which is fine, but
One of the things I like that my department is doing is our training division. We're a 250 member department, and our training division has 6 people in it. Basically, a chief officer that is in charge of it, a captain, or I should say 2 captains, and then they fill the next roles with drivers and firefighters. And so firefighters, drivers can rotate in, spend a year or 2 in the training division, get some perspective, and so it doesn't always have to be a company officer. It can be at any level, and I think that's great. I wish more departments had the opportunity, because if your department's big enough where you can have multiple people in the training division, they always want to fill it up with, officers. And it's like, well, maybe give a firefighter or a driver, give them the opportunity to kind of go in there and experience it. It might motivate them to promote up, which is another issue that we, in the fire service thing that we deal with is, everybody loves being, and we had this conversation when we were here in the conference, is like the best position. What's the best position in the fire service? And most firefighters will tell you it's either running backstep or it's being a captain or a company officer, and it's the best position. And as a battalion chief, I used to think that, and I still think that probably the funnest position I had was I had the most fun as being a company officer.
Yeah.
But right now in my career and where things are going, I think the best position for me and my interest in leadership and development, mentorship is being a battalion chief. And but we struggle at getting some of our great firefighters to want to take that next step, because they don't want to give up all the fun that they're having.
Right.
And the reality is, and it goes back to the earlier question, is that if I can get them out of their comfort zone, they're going to develop more, be a more better rounded firefighter, and I can get more out of this individual. They don't want to leave the busy truck or the busy engine or whatever it is, or they know that if they get promoted, they're going to have to leave this battalion and have to go to somewhere else. But everything is so just like temporary. You might leave the busy battalion, but it just always seems to work out. In our department of 10 stations, the guy's like, man, I got promoted. Now they're sending me up to the North Battalion, or they're sending me, but they always come back. I mean, if they truly want to be in that busier battalion, they can always get back.
Terry Ehler's retired chief from the city of Newburgh, and it's a scrappy city. Like, just they run 2 engines in a truck, and I think now they're down to an engine and a truck because of budget cuts. But like a lot of fire duty, and he would always say, like, when guys got moved around, you will always come home. Like, there will always be a time, like, and this is like temporary. You're gonna, and so, I'm gonna have to spend a year, and it's like, yeah, but what's a year out of the 20 years that you're gonna do this, or 20 plus years, really, right? So that's an interesting perspective too. I think we forget about that sometimes. So, as a battalion chief, do you set expectations for new company officers that are working on your shift?
Yeah, absolutely. Before, So when I first got promoted, I was working on a leader's intent document and had this really long, drawn out leader's intent, and we kind of gone back and forth. And in our mentor group, we talk about leader's intent, and we talk about creating documents for that. And the military uses it, and it's very successful. But basically, what I do now, because I left as a battalion and I was running the fire academy for the county, so it was a different role that I was in, and I came back, and so all these company officers that I'd worked with before, they were like, "Hey, Chief, we're gonna sit down and go over expectations." And you guys know my expectations. I mean, we don't necessarily need to go over them again, but I think markman op and do your job, treat people right, have an all-in attitude and give an all-out effort. Those really sum up the aspects, I think, of my company, and my guys know that I want to be involved as a battalion. I enjoy going to calls. I enjoy training. I think one of the biggest mistakes battalions make, or maybe departments make when they have battalions, is that they make battalions do so much administrative work. And the reality is, I get smaller departments, you might have to do that. But the reality is battalions need to develop their company officers, need to develop their companies, their people. And you see so many battalions, like in my level, where I don't have any administrative duties. My job as a battalion is pretty clear. I manage my shift, manage my battalion, and develop my people. And so many of them just don't go out and train with their firefighters. And some of it is they don't want to look like fools. Some of it is they don't have the relationship with their people, so they feel uncomfortable, like they shouldn't be around, And one of the greatest things that we can do is be out there, understand the tempo of our people, understand what their capabilities are and everything. So it leads to that whole thing about, developing people. I like to be involved. I like to be, I like to train a lot. I like them to train a lot.
I would think too, like just the aspect of the chief, and particularly in this, what we're talking about, the battalion chief training with the guys, like you get such a, I would think there's a perspective to gain. So when you're on the fire ground at an incident like that, like you talked about the tempo, but like you've trained with them, so you know where they're going to be at and where they're not at, and it kind of like just gives you that edge as an incident commander to, like, it would just make you sharper because you've trained with your people, so now you're just picking up on it, like when something's not going right, like, hey, why are they
absolutely,
or what's holding up the line, where's the truck, like, kind of like just all these things can kind of start to fall into place, and you can start getting ahead of problems before they become problems. So that's,
a good example. You're absolutely right, because it does help. Not only does it get me to understand the tempo, but it also gets me to understand where we're slowing down on something, so I can, like, where's there a problem. And again, my department, we only have one ladder truck, so the company officers that are promoting to battalion chief, most of them don't even get to go through the ladder truck, because we've only got 4 company officers that work on the ladder truck on the 4 shifts. But I think some of the strongest battalions are the ones that have actually done all those roles.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there are smaller departments out there that require it, but LAFD is about the only department I know that to promote to battalion chief, you have to go through Captain 1, which is an engine captain, and then Captain 2, which is a truck captain, task force commander, basically, to make battalion chief. But most other departments, and I've even talked to Ray McCormick and guys from FDNY, I'm like, hey, do you to promote to battalion chief, do you got to go through captain? No. Do you got to work on the truck? No. So I should say, do you have to work on the truck? Because they got to go through captain. Do you got to work on the truck? It's like, no, you never even have to work on the truck. And those experiences, it's helped me out. It helps me understand when the truck is slow to get to the roof or the truck's slow to set up. Okay, I understand that more now because of my experiences. But when you're a battalion that doesn't have that experience of working on a ladder truck, guess how you figure that out? You got to be there. You got to watch them. You got to be a part of it.
Yeah.
And that's how you build it. Otherwise, you just come into it blank, and you're just like, hey, it's almost like doing tabletop, scenarios. It's like, okay, ladder, you go to the roof, give me a roof report. And then a minute later, you're like, all right, how's that roof report? Well, they're still setting up.
Yeah.
Right? And the only way you understand it is going out there and training with them.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think of, like, too, the, probably 10 or 15 years now, it was like we had flashover training. The state of New York bought this simulator or whatever. So it's not that big of a deal, but like we got to talking to one of the instructors who was from New York City, and he was explaining to us the guy that was helping him was going to be moving to a ladder company, and he's like, he's going to be a really good truck guy. And like, I'd made the joke of it was kind of short, And he's like, he's like, no, but like I said, why is he gonna be good at being on the ladder? Like, and he's like, oh, because he understands engine work. And he went through like this whole thing about like how like it's like he's gonna have that like inside knowledge from being a nozzleman of how like what his job's gonna be on the ladder to make it easier, whether it's forcible entry, OV, or going to the roof. And I was like, wow. And he's like, yeah. He's like, unfortunately for us, most guys don't go from the truck back to the engine. But like for the ones who, for whatever reason, ended up here early on in their career, they really should go back so they have a better understanding of these things and kind of how they cross. And it's like, they just made, and next fire we ran, I was like just a little bit more aware of what was going on in relation to that, just because I never thought to kind of put that into my radar.
Yeah, I think that when you're looking at I like the traditional set of how it should go, the flow, like what you were talking about, is like you should come to an engine, you should understand the engine tasks, and then jokingly we say you should promote to the ladder truck, right. And then because in the traditional sense of truck company operations, the ladder truck doesn't typically have water, unless it's a quint. That's a whole nother thing. But it doesn't typically have water. You have a pressurized water can. You're working independent of a hose line. You got all these things, and so it takes a bit of experience and understanding, especially fire behavior understanding. But I will also say, especially on the West Coast, where there's more roof operations, I think as a full truck, the ladder truck is a young firefighter's game, and so the idea that you slowly but surely get tired and then you go to the ladder truck because they go on less calls than the engine does, and now you got the older, maybe more experienced, but you got the older, maybe not as flexible, not as agile individuals working on the ladder truck. Well, that just slows the ladder truck down.
Yeah.
And like in my organization, we just see this blend. I mean, we can have brand new firefighters, or I should say newer firefighters, haven't really had much time on the engine. They come onto the ladder truck, and there's limited experience. And so our education, thank God, in the academy, we do stuff like VES as part of Pro B's training. And so their education that they're getting in the academy and their ongoing education gives them enough. But we don't really have that traditional structure, and I wish we did.
I just had a thought. On the ladder truck too. Like, what was the staffing of the ladder that you're running in your city?
Three.
And I think that even with 3, like there's the opportunity to split crews, and the officer and the backstep guy are going in and doing something else, and there's a lot of independent thought that has to happen.
Yeah.
On a ladder company. I always loved where different mindsets came from. I know when I volunteered in Prince George's County, like this guy Matt Leonard sat me down and he was like, listen, like when you're on the engine, like you are to protect that truck company if they're going to do a search, like hold the stairs for them, kind of thing. And I was just like, it's like, wow, like that's just a kind of a crazy, I hate saying it's crazy, but I just never thought of that. I was like, well, why don't we just go put the fire out? It's like, if something bad happens, like those are our guys kind of protecting things. So it's just the different nuances of truck work always interest me, because the thought process is so analytical to an extent, but it's also so fluid. So
yeah.
But so there's something else that's coming out. This is why I always should have notes when I'm. So what did you think of the conference overall? Is the first time out here at Revolutionary Fire?
Yeah, this was my first time. I was honored that David invited me along. It's funny, he ran into my wife at a Fire Wife Life event, and so he was talking to her, and he said, hey, would your husband be interested in wanting to come out? And I have a decent social media presence, and so I think that's how he kind of knew of the things that I'm interested in. And so he asked if I would come out, and yeah, I've been to St. Louis a couple times, but I've never been out to the Ozarks. Yeah. And so I was told, I live in Vegas, so I'm used to hot weather, but I was told, watch out, it's going to be hot weather and a lot of humidity. And we didn't really get any of that. But conference-wise, I love the smaller 200 attendee conference, more intimate.
The first time I came out here, that was the thing that I kind of was really just shocked at, was like how close everybody was. Like, you'd say like you come in as a stranger to his family, but like even like from the aspect of afterwards being able to talk to the instructors, whereas like FDIC or something, that's a big conference. Like you've got, I mean, there's just your activities are booked.
Yeah.
You're doing your hot classes, your lectures, and then you're so shot, like you're going to the tap room, the district tap room or something like that, and there's like 1,000 people coming up to say hi to you, and there's no downtime. Whereas here, like you just have that after class, after kind of ability to be like, hey, like, you know, I wanted to follow up on something you said, and that, or just even have a beer and, you know, talk shop. And it's just I'm amazed by that, and I tell people like draw. You know, Jeremy said this a long time ago. Put a pin on the map where you live and draw a circle 300 miles around it. And you're going to find a micro conference where you can get the same level of instruction, and you're going to get more attention to the matter. So.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because like when I started going to conferences back in the mid '90s, is like these micro conferences didn't really exist. I mean, you had Firehouse, you had Fire Engineering, or I should say FDIC. You had Fire Rescue at the time when Fire Rescue had their own conference, and that was just about it. You know, and then you might have a state training officers conference or something like that. Yeah. And now, you know, now you've got just, they're everywhere, and it's cool. It's cool, and I would rather be in the small micro, you know, the organic type conference than. And I love going to FDIC, and I, you know, when I'd go to Firehouse World back in the days, I mean, I love going to those. But this smaller conference allows for you to like focus on whatever it may be, and there might be a small group, and I'm also with the Fools, so I usually run into some Fools members, and guys want to talk about stuff related to the Fools or training, or they're following me on something else. You get around a table like this, and there's only 50 people in the room. It makes it real easy to be able to have conversation with multiple people. Whereas the days that we were at the CLADA or, you know, at the district and all those, you know, you'd be in there and it would be just slammed with people trying to have a conversation with it so loud, like you could barely even hear the conversation. And then when you went outside, there was another 1,000+ people there, and it just made it really difficult.
It reminds me of my wedding. Like, there's so much going on. You're trying to talk to everybody, and you're like, all right, I gotta go to bed.
Yeah. He's like, you didn't get to eat. You know, you had this great meal for everybody. You didn't get to eat it. You carried the same drink in your hand for hours, trying to meet as many people.
It like it's yeah. What one of the, I remember the question I was going to ask you before was in the travels. What's the difference between truck work that you've seen from, like, you know, you're on the West Coast versus like the East and then even the Midwest? Like, do you see a vast difference in what we're all really trying to accomplish, or is it just mainly how we attempt to get the mission done? Is just you know, we all get to D eventually, but it's just we put the orders a little different.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I mean, one of the groups I'm with, the roof pervs and with the highwaymen, you know, we spend a lot of time doing like roof operations. It's LA's approach, West Coast style approach to roof operations, and there's a separator, and you know, not to cause any controversy or anything, but there's definitely a separator between firefighters on the East Coast and firefighters on the West Coast, and it all comes back to building construction. So you've got the engineered, some call it lightweight construction. And when I came into the fire service, you know, some of the stories are being told about like gusset plates popping and, you know, trusses failing and all these things. That really I haven't seen it. And so I think the first separation is how we approach building construction. If you were in an old part of the country, the East Coast, you know, you're probably pretty comfortable with you know, Main Street USA, right?
Yeah.
And that is your building construction, and you're not as comfortable. You might, you know, understand what you think you understand about engineered construction, whereas in my world, it's all engineered construction. If I didn't work in or on the roof of an engineered building, I wouldn't be doing any of the work whatsoever. And then on top of that, we still have a duty as firefighters. I don't care if if your city is 200 years old or if your city is 50 years old. You still have a duty of firefighters to protect people. And where I'm from, people live in lightweight or engineered buildings, and so we have to be able to work in those environments. It's a different environment than that in some other type of building. So the first thing I would say, truck-wise, is how we approach building construction and what we allow our people to do and what we're comfortable doing. I get in discussions all the time with firefighters that, they're like, I'd never want to be up on a lightweight roof, and I'd say, I'd rather be on an engineered lightweight roof than I would rather be on some of those buildings that are 150 years old, that are made out of conventional construction. I'm like, because how do I know the structure? I mean, it seems solid, but it could fail at any time. Whereas on a lightweight, I know but it's my comfort zone, right? Yeah. So I would say the first thing is how you approach, your perspective on building construction. How does it impact truck operations? Then the other thing is, quints have become very popular, and one of the classes that I used to teach is basically a quint is a suburban truck company, and a lot of departments that are looking for accreditation and all these things are going to put water on their ladder trucks because they want that extra half a point. They look at it for their, and it's changing the shape of what is the role of a ladder truck. So again, there's the other part. If I work in an urban department that is really structured, FDNY, Chicago, you name it, you have very structured duties and what everybody's doing. But you come to the West Coast, a lot of the departments, even some of the bigger departments that they're not LAFD, they're running quints, and you're like, well, they have a different role, so it changes there. Just use LAFD as an example. LAFD runs the light force, but it's actually a task force now. I mean, they have a couple of light forces, but they're running a ladder truck with an engine that is married to it. I mean, we don't want to call it a quint, but it's. Yeah. But when they go to a fire, if they were all by themselves, the 200 engine or the 200 pumper, what they would call it, that's attached to the truck, it goes and it will pump a fire. Same concept as a quint, and together I believe their staffing is 6, and they would handle it the same way, but just a little bit different. So I think when you're looking at those things, it makes it a little bit different. But what's cool is we're starting, over the last 15, 20 years, tools have changed. Yeah. I mean, everybody has. So when I came in, we had that piece of shit style bar, the Paratech, the shiny, right. The Hooligan. And what's really cool is now wherever I go, those that are into the job, everybody's got pro bars, right? Yeah. And now, so everybody's getting educated. So our tools are starting to be the same. If they're using different types of hook, New York hook or Lockwood. Yep. So all of these tools are starting across the board. So I can be in the East Coast or I can be on the West Coast, and you're starting to see those tools. And so our tools are getting the same. It's just now where you're at, maybe where there's a quint, how you're going to handle that is going to be a little bit different. And I think, again, going back to the building construction, is like how you're going to approach engineered buildings. It changes the way that we operate as ladder companies across the nation.
And really, I know we've been going for a little bit here, but Fools, you remember the Fools group? I know that there's a lot of people who ask us about this because we were kind of, I don't want to say we're like intertwined, but we've gotten to know Rusty Richter very well from New England.
Oh yeah, Rusty's great.
And I love how I could listen to him talk. Like, he's a mixture of like Peter Griffin and Seth MacFarlane.
And I like his mustache.
Yes. For people who are, like, if somebody feels that they're missing something in the fire service, like, should they be seeking out the Fools group?
I would say I started in the Fools in 2002 is when I actually got my card, but 2001 is when I first met a group of Fools, and I met them on the West Coast in Sacramento on a roof. Bob Pressler was there teaching a class. Kevin Trost was the captain from Sac City, and that's when I first met somebody of the Fools and first learned of the Fools. And then what was really cool is I started to realize that all these cool cats that knew the job and that were really into the job and were really into training, they were all Fools. Yeah. And I didn't know at that time, I really didn't know who Bob Pressler was, and I didn't know these guys. But what it did is I was like, man, if these guys are part of the Fools, then I want to be a part of this organization too. So I joined in 2002. Fools started in 95, a group of firefighters from Florida basically. As the group got together, it's gone across the nation, and we've have all these different chapters. I joined my chapter up in the Pacific Northwest, and now I've gone through training trustee as the international, and right now I'm the Western regional rep, so I've got 35 chapters I'm responsible for. But it's a great place because it allows for you to network. It doesn't matter if you're career, you're volunteer, Doesn't matter if you're male or female. It's all about brother and sisterhood, and it's about training, it's about networking, it's remembering our fallen brothers and sisters before, and holding on to some of the traditions of the fire service.
Yeah, I've been very impressed with New England. That's the Fools chapter that's most active in our area. So I always want to I tell guys, I'm like, it's one of those things where I said to Rusty, I was like, we don't really have I think we're missing it because we either have to go to Jersey or up to Maine. So do you want to get involved with tailored ham or a pork roll, or do you want to go get lobster up in I'll take the lobster any day of the week. But,
yeah, Rusty's chapter is a very active chapter. Muddy River Fools in St. Louis is an active chapter, and I mean there's a number of chapters that they're all over the country. I mean, you can go on to foolsinternational.com and you can look up and see where there's a local chapter, and you can join a chapter. And in a lot of these conferences you go to, there's always some element of the Fools that are here.
Right.
And
solvers.
Yep, and you can just get in line with them, but I've got a lot. I wouldn't be where I'm at today. I wouldn't have these opportunities if it wasn't for the Fools and if it wasn't some of this stuff. So.
Thank you for taking a little bit of time today to chat with us. I appreciate it.
Oh man, I appreciate it, brother. Thank you very much for having me.
Not a problem. Everybody, it's Rob, National Fire Radio, cutting it up with Rob Fisher, Revolutionary Fire Tactics at the Lake. We'll see you guys later. Thank you.
National Fire Radio.